Coming up, there's a brand new rule in college football that may have done the impossible. It's gotten Nick Saban, Gus Malzahn, along with Alabama and Auburn fans to actually agree on something. We'll talk about it next right here on SEC Country Live. In for a tune-up here, it seems like. It's Brandon Adams, it's Mike Johnson, the former Alabama All-American. We're glad to have you with us here today on SEC Country Live. A lot to dive into, more fun stuff from Nick Saban coming up. For a lot of non-Georgia fans, you're going to hear something from Kirby Smart, I think, today that you've been dying to hear for a while. We'll do all of that. Hope you're doing well today.
I'm doing good, man. I think this is going to be a fun show, and I was just in the comment section about to tell Bo Molinari, we got some Chris Del Conte for him coming up in a little bit, the UTAD, talking about that rivalry game getting fixed back up.
There you go. We'll look forward to that. And by the way, last show for me for a week. There will be SEC Country Live next week. I will not be on it. I'll be taking vacation, but looking forward to kind of finishing strong here today. And with that, we'll start item number 1 on our SEC Country Live first and 10 list. And there is a new rule in college football this year that's going to limit headsets on the sidelines to 20. Now, I said this morning on Dog Nation Daily, I guess I'm just stupid. And I go to these games all the time. I think I'm paying close attention. If you'd asked me how many headsets are on the sideline, I might have said 4.
Right.
Like, I had no idea there were more than 20 headsets as it is, and they are limited, and a lot of folks are unhappy about this, including, I'm going to read here from AL.com, as they quote Gus Malzahn at the SEC spring meetings in Destin, saying, "This 20 headset rule is a joke. There is no doubt about it. I think that's got the ability to hurt our game. That's a really big deal, and that came out just to try to affect staff sizes. Any rule that's put in place because of something else is not good. That's something we're going to have to deal with. The quality of the game, the coaching, that's what I'm concerned about. The fact that you can only have 10 assistants if you're, or your 4 GAs up in the booth have headsets on, then you're going to put 4 of your current players on the headset. I don't know. I mean, that's going to affect the game, and that's disappointing." Gus Malzahn, strong words there, is quoted by AL.com, and believe it or not, his counterpart in the Iron Bowl rivalry, Alabama coach Nick Saban, he agrees. He was asked about it, and his response just as forceful, although maybe slightly more colorful. Here is Nick Saban on the 20 headset rule.
We're not going to have anybody on the headsets that aren't allowed to be on there, so I don't necessarily think it's a good rule. I think it's very short-sighted. It's an opportunity for somebody to try to control how many people we can have on a staff. Look, everybody knows my theory on all this. You know, we're not allowed to hire high school coaches in any kind of developmental position. They've got to be full-time on the field. So if we don't have interns and graduate assistants and people who want to be a part of our game, who's developing coaches? Where are they coming from in the future? I'm really happy and pleased that we have probably 5 or 6 of our players, former players that have played for us over the last 10 or 11 years, that want to come back and be coaches. And I can't offer them all opportunities to do that. We have some in the program, but others we don't. Well, I think it's healthy for them, and I also think it's good for student athletes. I don't see what's so bad about that. It's not cost saving because it doesn't cost much. So I don't know who's driving all this stuff, but you know, to me, it's kind of like mouse manure when you're up to your ears and elephant doo-doo.
Sort of a colorful line there from Saban at the end, another classic sort of rant from him. And as I said to start the show, I have to admit, I didn't know there were 20 headsets.
Right.
But the fact that these coaches want them and they're restricted, I believe, based on what some of the reporting that's gone on other outlets, by smaller schools who are trying to sort of drive the agenda for the bigger schools here. Well, I'm emphatically against that. Now, it's worth pointing out when Georgia coach Kirby Smart was asked about this, he didn't take nearly as strong a stance as Gus Malzahn and Nick Saban did for whatever reason. But nonetheless, I'm with Saban and Malzahn on this one.
Yeah.
This idea that you're going to try to like restrict the freedoms of the bigger schools, the more power programs to operate the way they want to, that's a bunch of hogwash to me.
No, it definitely is. And this is what the NCAA knows. They know that if they try to limit the amount of jobs available to football coaches, they're going to get sued. Yeah. Right? If that happens and they try to limit the amount of jobs, they're going to get sued. So what's the next best thing to do? limit the amount of headsets, limit who can talk to each other.
Limit what they can do. I can't prohibit you from being hired as an analyst, but I can prohibit what you're doing. And if you don't have a headset on, how much impact in the game are you really having?
Right. You really can't put a cap on like their salaries in the most part because they'll get sued doing that too.
Yeah.
So hey, let's make sure we keep a cap on how many headsets we can get. And the problem with that is this. First of all, there's not 20 people talking, right? These are just listening devices for the most part. I mean, these are little bitty earpieces, a lot of headsets. I mean, you have 10, 12 headsets. But some of them are just earpieces. Some of them are just listening to, see what the play call is. Some of them are documenting what's going on. Some of them are charting what the defenses are being called. So that's what you're seeing there. They're trying to eliminate some of those positions. I think it's absolutely ridiculous. I think that as a coach, I would believe that if you're trying to climb your way up from the high school ranks to the college ranks to probably the pro ranks, you want to be a part of this. And I know that Nick Saban and Kirby Smart and Gus Malzahn, they're all going to adapt. They're going to have a guy with an earpiece that's writing things down and showing it to a group of 3 people next to him. They're going to adapt to it. So it's just ridiculous to me that they're going to put a little bitty speed bump in front of these coaching staff.
So let me try to argue the devil's advocate position on this because I've already said I'm actually in favor of both what Malzahn and Saban are arguing here. But there is a viewpoint that would say, come on, Nick. You say this is about sort of cultivating the next generation of coaches. What this is really about is leveraging every possible advantage you can get for winning every game in the upcoming season, which I ain't mad at him for. I mean, that's what a coach's job is to do. It's to use your resource to win as many games as you can. But what would you say back to the person who says, this is not about, creating the next generation of coaches. This is about, establishing an armada of analysts to go out there and beat Texas A&M or beat, LSU or someone like that.
My answer to that is what advantage are you really gaining, though? I know that people see staff sizes and all this, and I think there is something to be said for that. When you're game planning and you can bring in all these ex-SEC offensive coordinators and all that, but I think in terms of like how many people are in, the game plan's already set, right? You're just delivering those things. You're not saying, boy, we should do this, boy, we should do that. Nick Saban doesn't want 20 people talking in his ear. He doesn't want 20 people talking to the quarterbacks. It's very dialed down. There's only a couple of people on these staffs that are even allowed to talk on some of these headsets. So I don't know distinctly what advantage you're getting on game day by limiting or expanding.
But let me play devil's advocate here for a moment. Let's say we were playing poker against each other, or let's say we were playing chess. The sort of like basic rules would say I can't have people advising me about, which card to play here or which, pawn to move on the chessboard. In golf, getting advice is actually against the rules there. So, I mean, if you've got one analyst, let's say Butch Jones, as an intern, so to speak, at Alabama this year, if he's doing nothing but charting the tendencies of the Tennessee offense when Alabama plays, I mean, there is an argument to be made that it is some sort of advantage. And if you're a lesser program, that's an advantage that you don't have. Now, I don't buy into that argument. I think you got to draw a line between the haves and the have-nots, and the have-nots ought to be left to fend for themselves. So I'm actually with Malzahn and Saban on this, but that's the argument that somebody else would make.
And I understand that, but I think that it's like I said, it's just a speed bump. I mean, you're going to have Butch Jones, if he's charting the defense, he's doing all those things, then he's sitting next to an offensive coordinator or a defensive coordinator, he's writing them down on a paper, and he's going, look, they're right here. I mean, this is what we're doing. So I don't understand distinctly what advantage it gets. And I think that's what Nick Saban's trying to say, is this is mouse manure. I mean, there's all kinds of things going on, and you guys are going to put a speed bump in front of us to just make some people's jobs just a little bit more difficult, but it's not going to help anything.
Let me get a few comments here. Sonia Prescott says, the problem with Gus Malzahn is he won't have anybody listening to him on his headset.
I did see that joke earlier, so there were like Auburn fans were wishing Gus Malzahn take his headset off.
Yeah, it's sort of like the old thing back in the days when, and listen, all due respect to Bobby Bowden, he was a great coach, but Florida State fans used to always get nervous when Bobby Bowden would put the headset on. Maybe it's the same thing with Gus Malzahn. Maybe when he puts the headset on, maybe people think that Chip Lindsey's getting sort of pushed out of the way there. That's pretty funny there on that. Let me get a couple more comments here. Perry Williams says, I don't see a problem in interns being able to at least hear how the game works. Limit them from communication. Let them listen and learn. I agree with Perry on this all the way around. I mean, I didn't know they had so many headsets, but I don't have a problem restricting them, especially when it's coming from programs who say, oh, we don't want to invest as much in football as y'all do, therefore we want to make a rule that you can't do this. It's almost like we don't care what you do as long as it's mandatory that everybody has to do it. That to me is sort of distasteful about this, and I think it only potentially furthers the possibility that one day the Alabamas, the Auburns, the like-minded schools just simply take their ball and go home. They form their new league. The NCAA, after all, is just sort of a fictitious creation anyway. They form their new league, and sort of the smaller schools that kind of want to whine about this stuff, then by all means play for your own championship, play in your own league. We're going to be over here doing it to the highest level imaginable.
That's to me, that's what I'm talking about, though. It just seems like we're just putting a tiny speed bump. I mean, Kirby Smart, Nick Saban, Jeremy Pruitt, Ed Orgeron, they're all going to find ways around this, right? I mean, I don't know if you have to put a little speaker up in the booth or whatever you have to do. I mean, they're going to find ways to get around this rule. So to me, it's just ticky-tack to me.
I agree with Blake Robinson, who says it's a way to try to beat the SEC dominance in college football playoff and championship games. And, I completely agree with Blake on this. Rules like this always have a way of hitting the SEC harder than the other conference because the SEC just plays harder. The SEC goes after recruits in a more aggressive way. The SEC goes after tiny advantages in a more aggressive way. So therefore, when committees meet and come up with the rules, they almost always adversely affect the SEC more than the other leagues because the SEC just goes about a half step faster and plays a little bit rougher.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree too. And I'm trying to find. Oh, right here, Kyle Finley has a good point here. What they should have done is limit microphone specific sets, no limit on listening. I'd be on board with that. Like if you think there's an advantage over having a couple of ex-OCs up in the box saying this is what we should do and kind of guiding Mike Locksley along at Alabama, I'm okay with that. But I think just keeping people from listening, which most of these headsets are just listening devices, keeping people from doing that, to me, it's a tiny speed bump.
Interesting to hear, though, Malzahn and Saban on the very same side.
Yeah, it doesn't happen often. Yeah. You talk about two people that are philosophically opposed in terms of what they bring to their programs.
All right, item number 2 here on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. And if you're not a Georgia fan, I think what you're about to hear from Kirby Smart is something that you've been hoping to hear more conversation about. Because listen, everybody knows I'm a Georgia fan. I'm not wearing Georgia colors today, but I wear them on this show a lot, and I'm hopefully pretty good-natured about the ribbing that I get from people on our comment section who watch the show every day, who cheer for other schools. And Mike, the one thing they say to me all the time is, BA, listen, Jake Fromm and Justin Fields, they can't coexist in the same team forever. Right. You can't have two quarterbacks of this caliber. One of them's going to fly the chicken coop here at a certain point in time. Well, Kirby Smart was asked about the subject of recruiting elite quarterbacks this week at the SEC spring meetings. Our buddy Mike Griffith was on hand for all of this. And, Kirby Smart did acknowledge that in this day and age, sort of starting at the high school level, working its way up to college, it's sort of hard to keep guys on campus. Good players want to play, and if they're not playing for you, they do want to move on, especially at the quarterback position. Here's a little bit from Kirby on that.
These young high school quarterbacks, a lot of them are doing the same thing in high school. They're positioning from 8th grade to 9th grade. Where can I be the quarterback in the 9th grade at this high school program? And when they just go shopping and searching, they find a place they can go. And a lot of them start for 3 and 4 years, where it used to didn't be that way. So now it's kind of trickling up to us. So you're sitting there with kids saying, all right, I'm going to go there, I'm going to go there. You don't see the guy that, I use Hudson Mason as an example. I mean, he was a guy that kept getting better, and grew as a quarterback. Just not a lot of that. But I would argue that if you're a parent of a quarterback, that you would say, you know what, where's my son going to get the best development? Like, where's he going to get the best reps, learn to play a quarterback position like it is in the NFL? Not necessarily play first, but where's he going to learn how to play the position and sit in a meeting room where they teach you protections and the things you got to learn to play at the next level? Because they don't draft you at the next level just based on your play performance. They want to see what system you played in. How did you play? Did you grow as a quarterback? Have you learned? It's tough. It's tough keeping them around because they all are used to going where they can play that way.
I think there are two things that are interesting about that comment. One of them I think non-Georgia fans will gravitate towards, and the other comment I think Georgia fans will gravitate towards. Non-Georgia fans love the idea of hearing Kirby Smart say, hey, it's hard to keep these guys around, because there's a hopefulness, I think, on the part of a lot of non-UGA fans. Either Fromm or Fields will eventually leave, and that quarterback depth that Georgia thinks it has right now might soften up a little bit. Mike, I think the thing, though, that Georgia fans are going to sort of lean on from Kirby Smart there is his insinuation of, look, I'm not necessarily selling playing time, but I am selling preparation. I can get you to the NFL even if you're not starting for 3 or 4 years there, which is, I think, sort of a kind of a candid description of what Kirby Smart's telling some of these quarterbacks. Maybe that's what he told Justin Fields here for the class of 2018. But overall, I think it's a really interesting comment there from Kirby Smart.
Yeah, I definitely do too. And it's such an interesting insight. Like, I don't think you would ever hear Nick Saban go this in depth on a lot of these things. I mean, Kirby Smart kind of opening up about the situation that's going to be happening in his locker room, in his clubhouse, in that meeting room. I think it's delicate, man. It really is delicate. And that's why I brought the point up to you yesterday about the new quarterback commit down at LSU is, he says the reason he's going to LSU is because, boy, I can start as a true freshman. It's like, okay, now where do you tiptoe that line in terms of who you're bringing in this signing class? And I think that quarterbacks these days, and we've talked about this a ton of times on the show, it's just such a a delicate position in terms of college football where these guys want to go, they want to go where they can play, and they don't even look at really the development behind it, the development between, learning behind a great quarterback that you get all these, these attributes and this work ethic and all these different things of reading defenses. A lot of people don't look like that. They look at it and say, how soon can I get on the field? And it's interesting to hear Kirby Smart from that angle.
Couple comments here on Facebook. Mike Quinn says a lot of quarterbacks are just big spoiled babies. And I'm going to say this right now, and y'all can save this audio and play or video and play it for me later when one of these two guys from Georgia maybe leaves, although I don't think it's necessarily given that one of the two will. I don't think you're a baby if you want to go somewhere where you can play. If one coach chooses one quarterback over the other, if you're the guy that loses that competition, I don't think it makes you a baby to want to go somewhere and play. And because we've seen coaches be wrong a lot. I mean, there are a lot of instances where talent evaluations end up being wrong. And I may look at Fromm in field and say, okay, that's my guy. I want him playing. Some other coach may pick the other guy, but there's no guarantee that either of us are going to be right on that. So whether it's Fromm and Fields at Georgia, if it's Hurts and two at Alabama, I don't think it makes you a baby to leave and go find somewhere you can play. Players want to play.
And I would love to come on here as like a meathead ex-offensive lineman and be like, well, a bunch of quitters. I agree with you, man. I really do. When I struggled seeing time at guard, guess what? I switched over to tackle. When the tackle thing became like it, kind of run its course, I switched back over to left guard. I played a little bit of left tackle. I played a little bit of center. You're able to switch up at so many other positions that quarterback is just so unique in terms of quarterbacks in college football that sometimes you have to find a place where you can showcase your talent.
Greg Steele says, it's a nice try, Kirby. Greg's, of course, a Florida fan, a great commenter on our show. He says, nice try, Kirby. The best place to develop is on the field. Do you agree with Greg on that? Can you develop for the NFL without being on the field?
I think you can, and I think that we've seen it happen before. I think you can have this meeting room time, you can develop behind somebody else, but I think you have to draw a line at some point. I think what Greg's talking about is when you look at the Georgia situation, you can only learn off the field so much. If you're going to have Justin Fields and you're playing 3 years behind a Jake Fromm, and then you're looking at that 1 year to really shine, that might not be a big enough window. I think if you have to kind of step out and you feel like playing time is the way to kind of develop, then you need a 2 or 3 year window.
But if you transfer, let's a hypothetical situation here. If a quarterback were to transfer and go to a place where he can play right away, but he ends up playing a lot of spread style concepts where he's standing in the shotgun the entire time, I'm not sure that playing time gets you where you want to be. I mean, if you want to give me, let's just say Justin Fields because he just got to Georgia. Him as the number 2 quarterback playing sparingly, but every day in practice learning an NFL-style offense with a lot of multiple formations where he is under center, he's doing that kind of stuff. In comparison to some Big 12 quarterback, none of these guys ever pan out at the NFL level because what they're doing every single day during practice and on the fall Saturdays during the games doesn't mirror what the NFL does. I think, if anything, you being on the field may actually hurt you because you've gotten really good at something the NFL is going to try to coach out of you the moment you get up to the professional level.
Yeah, but what the NFL is looking for is they're looking for things that they know and that they can hold and they can see. They want something quantifiable, right? They want this many passing yards or a Heisman Trophy or team was this good or you were a leader, you were doing this. I think just when a guy is behind the scenes like that and you don't have as much film, I'm not saying it can't happen because obviously it's happened before. I just put Matt Castle in the YouTube comment section. But it leads to more questions, right? Boy, you know what? He's really, really good. We like what he's doing, but we only saw it for 1 year. Can he replicate that? There's something, was it a flash in the pan? Was his receiver core really good? Was his offensive line above average? So to be able to have more of a kind of sample, then I think that helps out a lot of NFL.
Over on YouTube, Blake Grimes says, when was the last time a quarterback was taken in the first round that only started for a year? I don't necessarily remember that. You mentioned Matt Castle, who's an example of a guy that got paid in the NFL.
Grindhard says that's pretty good.
Cam Newton, another example of this, but look at Josh Allen from this past year. Now, he played more than 1 year, but if you look at the stats, he actually played poorly. What the NFL told you is we don't care.
Yeah.
We like this guy as a quarterback. The fact that his stats suggest that he played poorly at Wyoming, not a big deal to us. It was really the same way. What round did Hackenberg from Penn State end up getting drafted? The truth is, I don't remember.
4th or 5th, maybe.
Yeah, but that's another guy who didn't have the world's greatest stats but still got drafted. I mean, the NFL tells you, and they've rightly or wrongly, what they've said over and over again is we're looking for a certain kind of quarterback. We don't care how well he played or how much he played in college. Yeah. There's a certain brand of guy we're looking for.
And honestly, if I'm being completely honest with you, I think Justin Fields could fit into that mold. I think that his legend is already kind of big enough in terms of scouts, in terms of people following college football that he's not going to need all that film. It's kind of like, Sam Darnold. I mean, he didn't start for, 3 years at USC. Kind of, was a flash in the pan. He was a Heisman front runner. He didn't really play that well at USC, and then he's, going in the top end of the first round. So I think the legend has to be big enough to carry you, and I think that Justin Fields has that legend. It's going to be interesting to see how it plays out.
A couple more interesting points on this from Kirby Smart. First of all, we just talked about the comparison between 2 5-star quarterbacks. As Kirby Smart says, though, it's not just elite quarterbacks where the transfer becomes an issue. It's really true for any quarterback you have in your program, including the preferred walk-on former scout team QB that just left UGA. Take a listen.
I don't think that's true for elite quarterbacks. I think that's true for any quarterback. I mean, what we're going through with Stetson, and everybody, we want to keep Stetson there with us. You can't say that he was coming out of high school, and he's looking for an opportunity to play. And you got to do the math. I don't know. Y'all tell me how many Division I schools are out there, 100 and 130? So if you're at 130, there's way more quarterbacks than that. And everybody would like to have 3 deep. So that's, how many is that? That's 390 or something. I mean, that's crazy to me that you're not going to have that. So it's a me now society. They want the self-gratification. They want to know they're going to be able to play. And it's different than any other position on the team. Because every other position on the team, other than maybe kicker, they know they can have another role.
A lot of good comments rolling in here on Facebook. Drew Stanley says, it's all about how you learn. Some people learn better on the field. Some can learn without so much playing time. Drew may be right about that. Zach Smith says Fromm's going to go pro after his junior year. Fields will still have a huge impact on games, even if Fromm is the starter for the next 2 years. They're going to coexist because it'll benefit both of them. Obviously, I think there's a chance that is true. As a Georgia fan, I sort of hope that's true. I think that's an interesting comment from Zach there. Van Bird reminds us that Mitchell Trubisky at North Carolina was not a long-time starter, long-time player there at UNC, but got some first-round love. Van, good comment there.
He didn't only get some first-round love. They traded the farm for him up in Chicago.
Yeah, that's a good point. Here's also a good comment, slightly on a different subject, from Indy Anderson, who says, NFL is changing, BA, and the Philadelphia Eagles system is proof of that, where you see Carson Wentz getting kind of a college style when healthy, doing big things. And NFL teams are doing a lot more spread concepts. BA, you're wrong. Indy, I will acknowledge, especially with Philadelphia, there is a little bit more spread stuff there. But you also hear Kirby Smart weighing on this of, hey, it's not just the elite quarterbacks who are looking to move on. It's even a former scout team quarterback who sort of gets the notion that he might go try to play somewhere.
Yeah, and I'll blow back against that a little bit. I do think that the NFL is changing in a lot of different ways at the quarterback position, but, Carson Wentz tore his knee up running, right? I mean, to me, I don't want to say it's a flash in the pan. I think that there's a lot of things in the NFL that are changing, but listen, RG3 came into the league. We played RG3 when I was with the Falcons. He tears his knee up, he gets a concussion. Cam Newton, they haven't allowed him to run as much as he used to.
Yeah.
I don't really know what I think in terms of like dual threat quarterbacks, if that's a long lasting thing.
We're going to talk to some Florida Gators here at a moment. Real quick though, one more from Kirby Smart here. With everything you just said, a lot of concerns for transfers. Kirby says it's not going to really impact the way that he coaches though, nor the way that he recruits. Here's a little more from Kirby.
I don't think you play that into the decision. I mean, you're being manipulated and dictated to, and you got to do what's best for your team, and you've also got to do what's best for each young man on your team for their development. And whatever that development is what you're trying to do. You've got to sell it to them. It's about the team, and you can't be just about you, even though there is a me generation and me society. And I think sometimes when you explain it to them, this is what's best for you, then you can help them understand why you're trying to do what you're doing.
So here's where I'm going to make you mad. I don't mean to, and I'm not trying to troll any Alabama fans that are out there. But with the one way in which I think that Kirby Smart has a chance of managing his quarterback situation in a way that's superior to the way that Nick Saban managed his last year with Jalen Hurts and Tua Tagovailoa, I think that Nick Saban staged an inauthentic competition. I think that Tua Tagovailoa had to have likely been always better than Jalen Hurts. Saban just chose to play Hurts over Tua. When you do that, you create the recipe for controversy because the players see with their own eyes something that's different than what the coaches are kind of going out there and saying in their post-game press conferences. I trust Kirby to have an authentic competition. If Fields is better than Fromm, I think that Fields will beat Fromm out. Now, I don't think that Fields will beat Fromm out, but if he did, I think that Kirby would make the switch there. And I think, based on what Kirby just describes and what I just said, I think that gives Kirby a sort of a leg up in handling this well, that he's going to at least be authentic in who the true winner and the true loser, for lack of a better word, is.
I understand what you're saying when it comes to that. I think a lot of people kind of expected, when after seeing that happen football in the national title game, boy, why isn't Tua playing earlier? I think Nick Saban just looked at it from a bunch of different angles than probably a lot of people outside the program looked at it. Listen, Jalen Hurts was not turning. I think Jalen Hurts had one interception last year. He's not turning the ball over. You're winning a ton of games. You've got a good defense. He's able to run the ball. He's able to pick up yards with his legs. And he was a team leader. He was a returning starter. It takes a lot to kind of pull the plug on that type of guy. So I think it'll be interesting to see the Georgia thing play out. I don't know if I agree with the statement that it's not a true competition. I think there's a lot of things in Jalen Hurts' favor that are not his arm.
We've been on this topic for way too long. We got to move on. But Hardwired to Self-Destruction on YouTube, Mike, he laughs and says Kirby's politicking with his words. You tell me. I feel like what Kirby Smart we just heard from there was the exact opposite of politicking.
No, I do too. I think he was being pretty candid. I mean, he's talking about, Stetson Bennett, and he's talking about how there's, 390 needed quarterbacks. You're going to have 3 deep at every school. And he's just, to me, that was Kirby talking about the issue that how do we get these guys to stay on campus? I mean, you can't really fault them for, like we said, you can't really fault them for going somewhere they can play, but it's hard to find a 3 deep this day and age.
All right, let's move on here. Let's get ready to do item number 3 on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. And Scott Strickland also at these SEC spring meetings in Destin, Florida. A lot of the news this week kind of coming out there from the Florida Gulf Coast. I had something interesting to say about the rising assistant coaching salaries. The Orlando Sentinel got some quotes from Strickland on this. We'll read there from that. He says, I think it's one of the biggest challenges we have in college athletics. It's what our coaches are making. They're in a market that allows them to enjoy those kinds of salaries, but I do think the optics of it are not helpful. Now, that's from the Orlando Sentinel. That's Scott Strickland, the Florida AD. He's mostly talking about assistant coaching salaries there instead of the head coaching salaries. Optics obviously referring to a bad look. Do you think it's a bad look that we've got multiple coordinators in the SEC now making around $1 million, some making far more than that, and really the going rate for a very good position coach is about $500,000 now?
Yeah, bad look to me is a little bit loaded. I mean, when we're talking about these positions, right? I mean, some of these guys are worth that much money.
Yeah.
I mean, ask LSU fans right now, is Dave Aranda worth the money he's getting? I think a lot of people think he is. I think that, Lane Kiffin getting $1 million plus, I think he was worth the money. I think that's just the going rate. Now, I think what a bad look is Scott Strickland making $1.1 million a year as an AD saying, boy, these guys are overpaid.
Yeah.
Listen, I'd rather pay, a Scott Cochran at Alabama that $1.1 million than have it given to an AD. I just think these guys are so hands-on. And it's such a cutthroat business that in order to get the best guys, in order to uproot a coach's family and get them to move to a Tuscaloosa or an Athens or a Gainesville, that's just the going rate now. You can't cap it.
Well, there's something you said that I completely agree with. I mean, I agree with almost everything you said there, but the thing that you say that I really agree with is, well, you got a favorite school, I got a favorite school, y'all have a favorite school. I'm going to give everybody here right now a choice. Would you rather have the world's best athletic director or the world's best defensive coordinator?
Exactly. That's exactly what my point is. Like, it's easy for Scott Strickland to go in there, boy, these salaries are getting, you're making 1.1.
Yeah.
I mean, tell me a different story another day, but I would much rather have all the defensive coordinators that are good for 1.1 million than have a good AD.
I'm going to tell you right now, I mean, for my favorite school, I don't care who the athletic director is. A lot of people don't like Georgia's AD. I don't care about that. You could flip-flop him with another SEC AD. I don't care about that. I think the athletic director's job is to do what the football coach wants. And to that extent, it's how I judge the success or failure of the athletic director. But there is a wide range of outcomes for coordinators, for position coaches. A lot of that's determined by recruiting, but for coordinators, you can measure more on-field, a wide range of outcomes. So you better believe there's going to be a financial reward for that small group of people who really exceed the expectations for the average coordinator. That's just like capitalism 101, isn't it?
Here's my train of thought on the whole topic, and you tell me if I'm right or wrong, honestly, because this is when I saw the quote and when I saw what the context Scott Strickland was using it in, here's what I kind of read into it. Scott Strickland's got a fundraise now, right? Yeah. I mean, it's like, boy, I used to have a lot more money coming in from this SEC network and from these bowl handouts and from all these checks getting split up. Now, if I want to build an indoor facility or kind of revamp the football offices or build a new gymnasium, all of a sudden I got to raise more money. And that's kind of what I hear coming out of the background of what Scott Strickland's trying to say is, boy, we used to have a lot more. Because where else is the money going? You're not paying the players, right? I mean, this money should be going to the assistant coaches for now.
Well, and somebody brought that up. I'm going to read that comment in a moment. Danny McClain says if Gus Malzahn's worth the $7 million, then all the other coaches are definitely worth what they get. That's Danny kind of, taking a little bit of a jab at Auburn. I understand where he's coming from on that, though. And I guess this sort of goes down to it as well that, and we talked about this with at Orgeron last year. If you have to spend a bunch of money on coordinators to make yourself feel better about your head coach, then you don't have a head coach that you can feel very good about. And I agree with you on the Scott Strickland notion of, okay, now I've got a whole program to sell, and I can't just sell the notion that the wonderful underdog Dan Mullen's going to coach them all up. No, I got to spend big bucks on coordinators and position coaches. They're going to bring in the elite players. SEC football is just hard.
Yeah, no, it's interesting too. Mike and Michelle Tankersley. I never know if it's Mike or Michelle that's commenting. Which one?
I like to think it's both.
Like just both of them watching.
I like to think it's like a happy couple sitting there like teaming up together.
Yeah, me too. You can let us in on that secret.
Actually, no, don't tell me.
Yeah.
I want to sort of picture.
Don't want to ruin the surprise.
Like a candlelit table with like the tablecloth, both of their actually.
Don't peek behind the curtain.
One laptop, just sort of sharing it there. That's what I sort of picture.
Yeah, but I think they bring up a good point. Where it depends. Did you see what our AD did at Tennessee last year? Maybe it was the ones that reported too a complete circus. Now that's a good point. Where when you look at what happened up at Tennessee last year, then all of a sudden you do want a great AD and you want to pay him whatever money is necessary.
Kyle Finley says, "I know the Clemson DC is worth his money." Brent Venables, we're talking about, he's helped completely change that program.
Seriously.
Yeah, I mean there are lots of examples of that. Ty Pham on the comment section says nobody likes Joe Oliva. That's certainly a sentiment I've heard expressed by a lot of different people. Blake Muncher says the coach is making hundreds of millions of dollars. Their respective universities, they're giving up all their freedom in doing so. They should make more money. They are putting in the same time as the head coach. As a coach, I believe teachers and coaches everywhere should get paid more. Well, Blake, I agree with you on that. And if you invest in a really good coach, even a good position coach, I mean, I'll speak for the school that I follow most closely. Like, look at Sam Pittman's offensive line recruiting for Georgia. You couldn't pay him enough based on the money he's making for the school.
Yep.
Dale McGee was the lead recruiter on Justin Fields, the lead recruiter on Zamir White, lead recruiter on number 3 running back James Cook. I mean, how much could you pay that guy to make it be equal to what he's brought to the University of Georgia? I mean, there's a reason why the salaries are going up.
It's a smaller version of the argument that always comes up every time Nick Saban gets a raise at Alabama. People are like, "Oh my God, these college football coaches are overpaid. How could you pay this guy $11 million a year?" Nick Saban, when you look at what he's brought to Alabama, is completely underpaid. I mean, they could give the guy $25 million a year, and they would still be in the green in terms of an investment. I mean, he is completely underpaid. So I don't want everybody getting off topic and thinking, boy, these guys are making this much. And for the most part, the college football coaches I know, this is not a career. This is a job. And they are making the money while they can before, all their staffs get fired for the most part.
Real quick, a couple more. James Pickle on Facebook says, when he's talking about the optics, these are publicly funded schools. The highest paid public position in most states are football coaches. I think that may be what he's talking about. James, you may be right. I respect that position. I think for me, and this is sort of a hard thing to explain, but I think most of us understand that the connection between the athletic association and the university is sort of symbolic at best, right? I mean, these athletic departments are run by the donations, although they are connected to a public university. I do get where that's coming from, and I also get, and I was looking for the comment, I can't find it, the people who were mentioning the notion of, hey, the optics aren't great when the coaches keep making more and more money and the players keep getting nothing. I think you and I both are, for the most part, pretty sympathetic to that argument that there ought to be money for the players somewhere. And I don't want to get into all the, the hassle of sort of how you get that done and how you make that work. That's probably a more complicated topic than we have time to get into.
Right.
But I think you and I both are sympathetic to the idea that the guys putting their life on the line deserve a little piece of the pie.
I completely agree, and I'm not on board with salaries per se in terms of college football players, and that's an argument we can have till the end of time. But I'm not on board with salaries, but there should be something. There needs to be like an insurance fund. You need to be insured for so many years after you get done playing. There needs to be a lot of changes made with all the money that does flow through college sports.
All right, let us do item number 4 here on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. ESPN had an interesting look recently at the toughest stretches for any teams in the country, and there's a handful of teams that get mentioned in there. One of those was the Tennessee Vols. I want to read to you the stretch that ESPN says the toughest in the country. It starts with an off week, and then you go October 13th at Auburn, October 20th, third Saturday in October against Alabama, and then on the road again at South Carolina. How about that for a road game sandwich with Alabama in the middle? Tennessee good enough to withstand that pressure?
No. I mean, that's the. I mean, what does good enough mean? Does that mean 2-1?
I don't know.
Does that mean 2-1?
I don't know.
I don't think that.
I don't know.
I don't know if what is. I don't even remember how many games was on that list. But
well, can I make it even worse for you?
It's going to be tough. Yeah.
Now, I guess the off week makes this a little easier. But do you realize there are 2 games prior to that? Now, you got an off week on October 6th. The 2 games prior to that are Florida, which is just, I mean, you can't have a more must-win game. I mean, you cannot. No team in the country for either side plays a more must-win game than Florida-Tennessee.
Right.
That is a knockdown drag-out. It's Florida on September 22nd. It's at Georgia on September 29th. Then you're off at Auburn, Alabama, at South Carolina. Poor Jeremy Pruitt.
Yeah.
What in the Sam Thunder as he stepped into.
No, and I think, listen, and we've talked about these schedules a ton of times. I've always brought up LSU's schedule. I think LSU has an argument against that. I think they've got an incredibly tough stretch when you look at some of the games. I've got LSU that's going at Florida. They got Georgia, Mississippi State, bye week, Alabama. I think it's a pretty tough stretch as well when you talk about teams that are going to be good. But you're right, for Tennessee, that's what – see, and I feel like when we talk to Tennessee fans on the show and we talk about the over-under as far as games you're going to win and talk about how 6 wins will be a good year at Tennessee, that's what we're talking about, right? I mean, I'm not talking about how good their team's going to be or how much talent's there. I'm talking about how hard their schedule is. I mean, almost none of these games, and this is a team, by the way, that Tennessee fans don't like to talk about, that went 0-8 in the SEC. So what is – the checkmark game? I don't know that there is a lot of those on that schedule.
Old Brant says Tennessee has a brutal schedule. They really do. Morgan Recton, who's a Florida fan, says I'm really looking forward to that Florida-Tennessee game, and I would agree with you on that. Alexander Rain says I feel for the Tennessee fans this year, but they could be on their road back. That's a nice sentiment there from Alexander on that. I like the ESPN perspective on this because you sort of said, okay, here's what I think the overall toughest schedule is, and we did that a lot last week. But there's also something to be said for toughest stretches within a schedule. That's more than just sort of a slightly different way to spin the same content. I do think playing really tough consecutive games can just absolutely derail a season. Now, for Tennessee, they're going to have a hard time finding wins anyway. You're probably right about that. But what makes it worse when you have to go back to back to back. As somebody else in the YouTube comment section said, I lost the comment, but Tennessee's playing both teams in the national championship game and both teams from the SEC championship game, just like right there in a stretch together. Man, that is ugly.
No,
that is ugly.
And it's so interesting to look at too, because we were just talking about Auburn, and now Gus Malzahn's like, man, something in the schedule needs to change. We need to flip flop things, because that's what it is. A lot of these schedules get to where they're backloaded, and you're playing these games later in the season, and then it's rivalry week, and then you've got the LSU Alabama night game, and those stretches are tough, man. I can't explain to the average fan out there how hard that is. Nick Saban breaks the schedules down into thirds, gives you like an extra off day after every third. The bye week is included in that. You cannot overstate how big that is in terms of a college football player's legs.
Saeed Ali says, well, this is the SEC, Tennessee, and I understand where he's coming from on that, but you'll back me up on this. There is a way to design a 3 or 4 week schedule in the SEC that ain't so bad. I mean, you can cherry pick a few teams and play them in a row. That's not so bad. That's the exact opposite of that. That's the exact opposite.
And honestly, I fought a lot of the schedule makers for some of this, because when you look at schedules, they're almost always backloaded. I mean, the thing. I mean, you get to Ole Miss and Mississippi State's the Egg Bowl, and then Mississippi State's playing Bama at home. Yeah. And you get a lot of these non-conference games in the first couple of weeks, and obviously that's taking a turn. But it's some of the schedulers' fault too.
Chris Farrell says, and we got to pick up the pace here a little bit, but Chris Farrell says Tennessee's going to go 0-5 during that stretch, and they very well might. It's certainly a possibility, and this is what I feel for Vols fans, because I've lived through this, Ed, with my own team. A losing streak is not fun. Most of the really power SEC teams, they don't lose consecutive games all that much, but when you lose 2 and 3 and maybe in some cases 4 weeks in a row, I mean, Mike, it's been a long time since as a fan you've lived through that. Now, you may have lived through that as a player, I can't remember, but as a fan, man, that's tough, man. It like Knoxville's going to turn into a really cold place if Tennessee goes in one of these long stretches where they're losing 4 or 5 games in a row.
There's nothing fun about it. I mean, there's really not. Nick Saban's first year at Alabama has been well documented back in 2007. I think we started the year 6-2, maybe lost to Florida State and somebody else. Well, we had some suspensions, and that season took a nosedive, and then all of a sudden you're back in the Independence Bowl. Man, that's you talk about a ghost town.
Can I say just one more thing real quick? And this won't resonate with you too much because you're a good bit younger than I am. But so Tennessee goes to Auburn on October the 13th. Am I the only one that feels this way? I have followed SEC football my entire life, not just Georgia, but the entire league. I mean, I live and die with the SEC. Y'all know that. You've got power program Tennessee, power program Auburn. I can't think of 3 memorable Auburn-Tennessee games. How is it these 2 power programs don't have more of any kind of rivalry whatsoever? I mean, obviously the scheduling now, they're just not going to play each other very much. But even going back, sort of predating the championship game, I don't think of Auburn and Tennessee as ever playing each other.
Yeah, I don't either. And that's, honestly, that's the reason I advocate for the 9-game schedule so much. It's dude, why can't we make these games happen? I feel the same way about Georgia and Alabama. I feel the same way about Auburn and Tennessee. I feel the same way about a bunch of other programs. Why can't we make these happen more often?
And by the way, if I'm wrong about that from either the Auburn side or the Tennessee side, y'all can let me know. But
I'm sure they will.
I have no memories of Auburn Auburn versus Tennessee. Let me do item number 5 here, SEC Country Live first and 10 list. Speaking of rivalries, there is some thought, maybe at some point in time, the Texas A&M, or as we would like to say here in SEC country, the Texas A&M-Texas rivalry might be renewed here at some point in time. Chuck Carlton, a reporter for the Dallas Morning News, catches up with Chris Del Conte here, the UTAD on this. The quote is, "At some point in time, we will pick up our rivalry. It's important to our state, important to our fan base. I'm assuming when it's appropriate and ready, we'll play. We like to do that. It's just matching up schedules." I find this Cold War, and I don't know how else to say it, that goes on between the Aggies and the Longhorns to be the single most distasteful thing in all of college football. I blame Texas A&M for it. I blame Texas for it. This is the most passive-aggressive nonsense ever. You can't tell me that Texas A&M didn't have some opportunities. It could have played Texas in a bowl game a couple times, and it sort of found a way to get out of that there when maybe it didn't feel like it benefited the Aggies to play that game. I don't like both sides for this. I think that both sides are incredibly distasteful with the way they go about this. And this quote is another example of just the, I don't know, pettiness. This is a gross rivalry.
It honestly is a brother dispute. You know what I mean? Like, it feels like it's intra-family. You know what I mean? It feels like people are in the same household arguing with each other.
To me, it feels different than that. Your description's interesting. To me, it just feels like two lawyers squabbling across the table. And it doesn't feel like brothers squabbling. It feels like divorcees trying to divide up an estate here. And if you've ever gone through that or seen a movie about that, you know how irritating that can be. That's what this feels to me more than anything else.
I guess the way I'm kind of looking at it is it's like two brothers that had a falling out, and he's like, I'm never talking to him again. And then a few years later, it's like, hey, I ring in the doorbell and say, hey, I'm back. I just wanted to say hello. I'm in town. Yeah. I think that a lot of different. This might just be the Alabama coming out at me, but I think UT, when they scheduled the game, the home and home against Alabama, I think this started, I think it kind of sparked a little bit of that. Why is Texas scheduling games home and home with Tuscaloosa and doesn't want anything to do with A&M?
John Nicholson says they're too scared to play us, plain and simple. He's speaking as an Aggie fan on that. And listen, when these two teams play, I think from an SEC standpoint, I'll obviously be rooting for Texas A&M, and many of you know I'm high on Jimbo Fisher. But I got to call John out for that comment. I don't think that Texas A&M has any room to stand on here to say Texas is afraid to play us. I think that Texas A&M, for me, is just as worthy of just as much blame as Texas is.
No, I think they both are. And Beaumont there is kind of chiming in on that discussion as well, talking about who's really to blame. That's kind of what I mean, though, in terms of it being brother. It's like I think there's just different points of view. Texas A&M is the one that left the Big 12, and obviously they had really good reasons to do so, and I think they're better off, but Texas A&M to me kind of reminds me of that program that's kind of gone away and has grown up and is ready to go be the bully.
Let me read Bo Molinari here, who says, actually, BA, Texas went out of its way with the other members of the Big 12 to not schedule the Ags. It's coming from Austin. A&M likes its new digs there, so that's Bo's perspective on that, and obviously he knows the situation there pretty well. He's a great Texas A&M fan. Let me get Janine Parks here, too, because her comment is similar to what a couple others have said, that Auburn played Tennessee in the SEC Championship in 2004. Auburn went on to play the Sugar Bowl against Virginia Tech. I obviously have great memories, or vivid memories of that season, not necessarily great, but vivid memories of the season. She says Auburn should have won the national championship. I actually agree on that. I thought that Auburn was the best team in the country that year, but it's sort of funny. Even though I'm sort of factually aware that Tennessee won the East in 2004, like when I close my eyes, I cannot picture Auburn, Tennessee in the 2004 SEC Championship. I have no memory of a single play from that game. It wasn't, I think even Tennessee fans would agree, the best of the Tennessee teams in all likelihood. I mean, a really good Auburn team, not a great Tennessee team.
Well, Tennessee went back to the SEC Championship game in 2007, right, and played LSU in that game, and I think that was kind of along the same lines. It was like, this is a good Tennessee team, but at the same time, I don't know that there was really ever any shot of them beating the eventual national champions.
All right, let's do item number 6 here in our SEC Country Live first and 10 list. Pretty fascinating audio. It's been out there for a while. I never heard this. Antonio Alfano was one of the great wins for Alabama so far in its 2019 recruiting class. Big defensive end, pass rushing type guy from up in the Northeast. And he recently made an appearance on the Alabama SEC Country podcast. And you were playing some of this on Roll Tide Daily today, which, by the way, if you're an Alabama fan, you ought to check out. 1 p.m. Eastern Time, 12 Central on the SEC Country Alabama video channels. Alfano clearly an example of some momentum for the Tide with his 2019 class. And he went into very good detail, very distinct, specific detail about why he chose Alabama over a team like Georgia, for instance. If you're an Alabama fan, you're going to like this. If you're not an Alabama fan, maybe a Georgia fan, maybe you don't like it quite so much. Here's Antonio Alfano.
I got a chance to meet with Coach Kirby Smart. Everything they do over there, which is kind of crazy, is based off of Alabama football. They were showing me their defensive schemes, the defensive layout, everything is basically Alabama. That's where Coach Smart has learned it from. And I'm like, you know what? Like, the reason how Georgia kind of got ruled out was, I was like, why go to a replica of the place that they're doing it from? Why not just go to the original place? Coach Nick Saban, Alabama football.
So listen, obviously I'm a Georgia fan, so, I'm going to be inclined not to love what Antonio Alfano says. I won't waste your time making that point. I will say that it's sort of interesting to see that argument for at least one major recruit still works. I've certainly talked on here a lot about what I thought was sort of a diminished level of recruiting momentum for Alabama after the 2018 class, that the new blood of a school like Georgia and Kirby Smart was maybe winning out with a lot of recruits, more so than than the old guard, old money of Alabama. But for Antonio Alfano, that kind of established program vibe seems to work with him.
Yeah, no, I won't go into detail, obviously, and start comparing the two programs and talking about the term replica and whatever else you wanted to say. Here's what I will say about it from an Alabama perspective. I think this new younger crop of coaches and the graphics they're kind of put out in the sales pitch is a little bit different this year. I think it's working. I think for a lot of these people, when you look at what Nick Saban did with the staff, I think he's going out and the question they're kind of hashtagging on Twitter is, why not Bama? I think that's kind of hitting home for some of these players, and so I think that's a big point for Bama fans.
I will admit this, that Alabama does have a lot of momentum for its 2019 class. They're having great success. A lot of players like Alfano, who I do think is a top-flight guy. Now listen, I still think that Georgia's in really good shape, including a lot of players here in the South that Alabama would like to get here. But there is no denying that Alabama they have the capacity to sign more players this cycle, but they're also making better headway with elite recruits here for 2019 than they did for 2018. Alabama fans don't like hearing this, but Alabama swung and missed a few times with its 2018 recruiting class.
No doubt.
The fact that I'm admitting that they're not doing that as much with 2019 ought to give more credibility to the criticism of 2018.
No, I agree. And I would have never ducked out on that argument last year, because the bottom line is this: when you're losing recruits that that Bama wants. I mean, it's not like, hey, you got an offer, but it's not committable. On signing day, they lost a recruit to Florida. They lost Bobby Brown to Texas A&M. I mean, they were losing recruits of guys they wanted. So it has been interesting to kind of see them try to slowly turn that ship around. I'm not going to sit here and claim that they're going to finish with the #1 class in the country. I think there's still a lot of things left to be decided, but it is nice that they have all the chips on the table and have full signing capacity this year to kind of go after a few guys.
Matt Goodwin says, to go back to the previous topic about not remembering the Tennessee-Auburn rivalry, he says, BA, you don't remember that 2004 SEC championship game because we had mediocre Mark Richt to Georgia leading us the Outback Bowl against Wisconsin. Listen, I love Mark Richt, but maybe I have blocked out some of that stuff because Georgia was underachieving there at the time. Also, one more comment I wanted to read on that same subject, that Mike and Michelle Tankersley says that BA's got to remember the Peyton Manning last game, the 1997 SEC championship over Auburn, 30-29 in the Georgia Dome. It's actually funny that you bring that up because I had blocked that in my mind. I was actually at that game. It was the first SEC championship game I ever got a chance to go to. I worked as like a volunteer usher that day for some reason. I don't remember how this happened. I worked as a volunteer usher. I had like the Georgia Dome shirt on. For a long time, I still had that shirt. I kept it as like a souvenir. So I had the Georgia Dome shirt on, worked as an usher. I stood there in the section next to the NFL scouts, had a great time watching what was a really good football game. I should have acknowledged that because this is back when I think Takeo Spikes was still the linebacker for Auburn, and the really good quarterback that Auburn had, Damian Craig, and obviously Peyton Manning was at Tennessee. That was a good Auburn-Tennessee game. I was at the game. Shows you how old I am now. I forgot about even being there.
And what year was that?
1997.
1997. I was 10 years old, 5th grade.
Living in Pensacola.
The whole world in front of me. Boy, that was a long time ago.
Yeah, listen. Indy Anderson, by the way, on this topic about the recruit says, I'm sorry, BA. Coach Saban is showing you that he's still Saban. Nice recruiting victory last year, but Georgia and Coach Smart isn't on Saban's level, just not yet at least. And obviously that's the work that Kirby Smart is going to. But the Alabama fans have to acknowledge here that there are a few players here in the South, both for 2019, certainly for 2018, Alabama really wanted that Kirby Smart just flat out won head-to-head.
No, I don't think there was a ton, and I really, that's tough to say. I think that Kirby Smart obviously developed a role last year behind Justin Fields, and things got rolling downhill. Every promise that Kirby made at the beginning of last year came to fruition, and they wound up in the national championship game. And I don't think Alabama for the most part, with the low numbers they could sign, I don't think they could overcome it.
By the way, somebody else in the comment section also mentioned a very interesting recruit that Tennessee picked up. We're going to talk more about that a little bit later on, coming up in just a moment. For now, though, let's do item number 7 here on our SEC Country Live First in 10 list. We talked yesterday about the 2020 quarterback from Louisiana, TJ Finley, a 3-star prospect for 2 recruiting cycles from now, choosing LSU. And I had a chance to read some of what Nick Suss, our colleague from SEC Country, and also what Sam Spiegelman wrote about that. And they were kind of both spinning this in a little bit different direction than I was, that this is the #1 quarterback in Louisiana for 2020, that maybe he's more of a factor in that quarterback of the future conversation for LSU than I realized. I mean, for me, this is still an issue where LSU's got to find that quarterback for 2019. I still think that needs to be a major prospect, like a guy like Grant Gunnell, who's apparently got a upcoming visit once again to LSU. It'll be one of many visits for him here over the course of this offseason. I mean, I haven't changed my tune on this from yesterday too much, but it's kind of funny to hear folks from Louisiana, in Louisiana, spinning the Finley win as maybe a little bit bigger deal than I guess I treated it as on our show yesterday.
Yeah, and honestly, I was kind of on board with what they're kind of saying, is that I think this really cushions the blow if you're not able to bring home that prospect this year. I really do. I mean, you got Joe Burrow for a couple of years. That was a huge recruiting win in and of itself. So if you look towards the future and you don't land that #1 prospect this year, having him on board in that 2020 class is an absolute huge deal for me. I think it's something down the road for Ed Orgeron to point at and say, okay, this is steam building in that direction. I think it's a big deal for him right now.
Here's what I'm going to come across as somewhat impolite, and I don't mean to. A 3-star quarterback is not a Pied Piper for a class.
No, I know. I agree. But he is, if I'm not mistaken, he's like one of the #1 player in the state of Louisiana.
Yeah, he's highly rated within the state of Louisiana. Right. But in terms of how he compares to truly elite quarterbacks, even in a year like 2019 where they're just, there is no true 5-star quarterback for 2019. But even with this somewhat depressed class of 2019 quarterbacks, I mean, this is not the guy that Ed Orgeron can say, see, here's what we're building here in the boot. I mean, with all due respect to Mr. Finley, this is probably not what he is.
I know what you're saying, and I'll go down that road with you a little bit, but I also don't think the last chapter is written for him. You know what I'm saying? If you're a 6'6", 230-pound quarterback and you're a sophomore in high school, still got some growing to do. You might see one of those LSU bumps, right? I mean, somebody might take an extra look at him and say, boy, 6'6", 230, looks a lot like Cam Newton. He's a sophomore in high school. I think he's got a lot of growing to. I don't think that's the last chapter we'll hear out of him.
Indeed. We'll keep following that. Item number 8 here on our SEC Country Live First in 10 list. Let me give you a couple of pieces of what I think could potentially be good news for the Tennessee Vols here, both in terms of a player that ends up on campus that some people had some questions about, and a player that's coming to the Tennessee campus, and a lot of folks thought he was going to go to another campus here in the SEC. Let me start with one of the centerpiece running back recruits for Tennessee in its 2018 class. You see Jeremy Banks there saying, officially a student athlete at the University of Tennessee. There had been some debate about this. This is the time of year where some guys are showing up on campus and there's some wonder of who's going to be there, who's got some academic stuff to still take care of. And that tweet from Banks, I saw a lot of the message boards from Tennessee fans. They were really celebrating that as good news there for the Vols. Banks was one of the best players that Jeremy Pruitt recruited here in his first year. I don't know that he's a big-time impact player on this 2018 offense, but getting him as a part of the 2018 class and kind of getting that clearinghouse stuff all taken care of, that's probably a pretty big win here.
I think this is such a lost conversation when it comes to college football recruiting. It's not only like getting the best players to come to your school, but it's picking out the ones that are going to make it there, right? I mean, Josh Jobe and Alabama's dealing with this with Josh Jobe and other schools around the conference that are dealing with this. How can we get this guy ready to go? How can we get him on our campus? How can we make sure all his scores are up to date? This is a huge win for Tennessee. If you can sign that class, because it wasn't some crazy class, but you have to get those guys on campus that you did get to sign on the dotted line.
And then the other thing here, it's the 4-star athlete Bryce Thompson, who was initially supposed to be part of the South Carolina recruiting class, but as reporting from 24/7 Sports indicates, Thompson ends up not going to be a part of the Gamecocks, ends up as a part of Tennessee, as Austin Price reports here that Bryce Thompson, the 4-star athlete, enrolls at Tennessee, sort of a late addition there from the Power Dutch Fork, a late addition to that Tennessee class for 2018. And, this is an example of what I do believe that Jeremy Pruitt's really good at. Whether it be the transfer guys, we've talked about a lot of them, this athlete who, did not, end up being a part of the South Carolina class and, postpones his decision after signing day, ending up at Tennessee. I have no idea what side of the ball he's going to play on. I think that's still up in the air. It sounds like he'd like to play wide receiver, but Tennessee needs 4-star athletes. They need capable, competent players, and Thompson has a chance to be one of those. This is another example of Pruitt looking for every slight advantage he can get. I'm going to give him a lot of credit for that.
You got to. And I don't see any other way to spin this other than Tennessee, when they kick off the ball in 2018, are going to be a better football team, a more talented football team than they were a year ago. And that's a credit to Jeremy Pruitt. He didn't go out and sign a huge class, but making some of these moves when you need to make them, finding the grad transfers, finding people to hop over, keeping Darren Kirkland on campus, getting Trey Smith healthy. All these things are going to start coming together. And I don't know that Tennessee is great this year, but when you get that talent on campus and you have good coaching, it's not out of line to think they could shock some people.
How about on Facebook, your boy Shane Higgins going in hard? I mean, I'm like 5 minutes away from vacation, and he's just absolutely hit me between the eyes. He says you can't spell bash LSU without BA.
I don't know. I don't know why you get a bad rap about LSU. LSU fans seem to feel the same way over in the YouTube comment section.
Are you serious? Are they ripping me over there too?
No, not right now. I'm just saying that sometimes you do get a bad rap on LSU. I don't ever think you're crazy about that.
Well, thank you.
The Bama stuff.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that very tepid compliment there. Here's what I would say to Shane Higgins and the others. I was the one touting LSU for getting Joe Burrow. When some of the LSU fans in our comment section were ripping him as a player that LSU didn't need, I was saying this would be a big win for Ed Orgeron and Steve Ensminger. I feel like I should get a little credit for that. I've been all in the purple and gold on the Joe Burrow bandwagon here.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that
I'm even the one that made the sort of funny Jeaux spelling for Joe Burrow. I stole it from somebody else, but I still did it.
I agree. I don't know why you get such a bad rap.
Cliff Nelson says because BA always devalues LSU.
I don't know if that's true. I don't know. I'm trying to go back in my head.
Here's what I feel, and this is going to make people even madder. I feel like sometimes I'm holding LSU to a higher standard than some LSU fans are.
I said the same thing all year last year about Tennessee. I got a lot of crap because I came on here a year ago, one of our first shows, and I was like, Butch Jones has to go. Butch Jones is a joke. Yeah. Butch Jones has got to be out of there. What happened? Tennessee went 0-8. I was just trying to be honest about the way I felt. I hold Tennessee to a higher standard than I think a lot of people were comfortable with last year. I think that's just the way you feel about LSU. You expect more of them.
I do expect more of them. I mean, listen, I remember a time when playing LSU on both sides of the ball was horrifying. For me right now, I don't know that for the average SEC fan, playing LSU is quite as scary as it used to be. And that, I think, is all that I'm saying there. But I think that Joe Burrow certainly helps.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting year for me in terms of LSU and the outlook, and I don't want to get off topic, but I think that a lot of good things need to happen down in Baton Rouge.
How about Jamie Blant here, as a South Carolina fan, says, y'all are giving Pruitt too much credit for getting a player who couldn't get his grades right. Muschamp put the brakes on the kid, not the other way around. I'm not saying that Tennessee stole him from South Carolina. I'm saying that there was a four-star athlete that was out there on the table, and Pruitt found a way to get him. I'm not in any way dinging South Carolina for losing out on Thompson. I'm saying there was a four-star athlete still on the board here, and Tennessee found a way to corral him in.
Yeah, and I think that's what's important because, listen, Jeremy Pruitt has to take risks like that this year. It's not so much Will Muschamp getting rid of him. Jeremy Pruitt has to go out and find talent. He understands what his roster looks like. He made all the comments after the spring game, and he's trying to do his best at that. I guess maybe you're trying to say don't give him that much credit, but I think it's a good thing.
All right, item number 9 here on SEC Country Live First and 10 list. So Emory Jones been working with a personal quarterback coach here this offseason. He ends up doing an Instagram Live video with him, and I didn't know this. So Instagram Live videos disappear when they're over, is that right? It's sort of like a Snapchat thing or whatever. So 24/7 Sports, I guess one of their reporters was actually watching the video and transcribed some of the quotes. I pulled one of the quotes from 24/7 Sports. I'll show it to you right now. This is Emory Jones about the transition to a football. The speed of football is different. One thing I think is your maturity level. You got to be kind of mature coming in from high school to college because there's not a lot of playing around. It's serious football. It was just a lot of things mentally that I didn't know about the game that I wish I would have known before I got here. Defensive-wise, coverages, protection, stuff like that. That's 24/7 Sports reporting a quote from Emory Jones that he did with his personal quarterback coach there on Instagram Live. He goes on to talk more about the sort of process of going through his first spring there. I mean, what do you make of what Jones has to say here and kind of where he goes into the summer after having already a few practices under his belt?
I think it was interesting, too, when you couple that with what Dan Mullen had to say this past week when he's talking about the cornerback competition. I don't know if he was on with Feinbaum or somebody, but I read his comments, and he was like, you know what? The great quarterbacks I've seen make the biggest strides from between spring and fall camps. They go out and they find their receivers, and they make these throws, and it allows you time to develop mentally. I can't stress that enough. People think, well, you develop on the practice field. Sometimes mentally you have to digest things. Sometimes it takes some time to think about what exactly is going on in front of you. Take some time away, take a deep breath, get back and go through 7-on-7s and say, you know what? It actually clicked for me back then. I understand what that route tree is now. Now I can watch some film. Now I can be more confident. Now I can play faster. I love the maturity level that it seems like Emory Jones is kind of displaying in his thoughts right there.
Yeah, I think that's kind of interesting. One of the things I'm sort of curious about seeing this summer, you know, for the most part, Emory Jones was kind of an afterthought during the spring. There was a lot of talk from Dan Mullen about Kyle Trask. There was a lot of talk about Felipe Franks. But he really only talked about Emory Jones when he was flat out asked, hey, how's Emory Jones doing? I wonder if Mullen will volunteer more information about Jones this summer. When he's speaking about what he sees in those opening remarks in his press conferences, does he say, and boy, Emory Jones is looking good right now? Because I think that'll tell you how much he's grown from spring to summer. Going through practices, now working with a personal coach, coming back, ready to start practicing again. Do we see some big-time growth? I think that Mullen, reading between the lines here, I think that'll be a very interesting thing to determine all that.
No, I agree. And obviously, Mullen's got a ton on his plate in terms of quarterback. And if Emory Jones does end up being a third-string quarterback this year, then you're not going to hear much about him. But it is nice to hear the updates on some of these younger kids. And a lot of Florida fans still picture Emory Jones as a quarterback of the future, and I'm not sure they're wrong.
All right, item number 10 here on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. I mentioned earlier that ESPN story that looked at the toughest stretches for teams for this upcoming season. The other SEC team on that list, besides Tennessee, who we spoke about earlier, was Arkansas. Now I'm going to pull up the Arkansas schedule here. I'm going to tell you about the tough stretch that ESPN points out for the Arkansas Razorbacks. And once again, you're going to sense a theme here. Auburn and Alabama are both involved. September 22nd, Arkansas is at Auburn. That's a sort of a little feistier rivalry than some people give it credit for, by the way. Then at Texas A&M, back-to-back road games in the SEC West. How did Chad Moore, what were we just dumping on first-year coaches? How many back-to-back road games does anybody play in the SEC West?
That's hard, man.
It's in like different directions here too. It's at Auburn, and then I guess College Station a little closer to Fayetteville, but really nothing's that close to Fayetteville. At Texas A&M on September 29th, and then you're back home at Reynolds Razorback Stadium to take on the reigning national champions, the Alabama Crimson Tide. That is ugly.
Boy, it feels good to hear you say that, B.A. I don't know if I've ever heard you quite make it like that.
I mean, listen, you got to acknowledge what it is, and we're not fake news around here.
Yeah, hopefully not. Hopefully we're not going that direction anytime soon.
So that's a tough stretch. The point is it's a tough stretch for
No, I agree with you. I mean, it's a tough stretch. It's like I said, we highlighted earlier a couple of the toughest stretches in the SEC in terms of scheduling. That's definitely right up there, and that's an Arkansas team that doesn't have a ton of talent.
Yeah, I mean, once again, it's that same thing we said about Tennessee. If you go through one of these stretches where you're losing multiple games, in Arkansas's case, and I will say this with all due respect, if you're losing games by sizable margins here, even at Texas A&M, that's a tough deal.
Well, and I think I think Arkansas fans for the most part understand what lies ahead of Chad Morris, but he's got to keep some of these things close. Like I said, the worst thing about Butch Jones last year at Tennessee was you're covering 39-point spreads. I mean, like you're allowing the other team to cover a 30. Chad Morris has got to do more with less, and he's got to keep his team locked in a lot of these games.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. It's our SEC Country Live First and 10. We wrap that up right there. We do it every single day. It will continue next week. I do want to remind you real quick, though, I am taking vacation next week. SEC Country Live will still be here. Mike's got some great surprises in store for you. We'll tell you all about that throughout the week. I will look forward to being back with you again the following Monday, though, and certainly enjoy a little vacation time. Thanks for allowing me to do that. And of course, I appreciate you being here with us each and every day. And of course, we look to close up the show the same way every day. We're always on the lookout for champions of life. And I don't know if you caught this last night from the ranks of Major League Baseball as a Canadian Goose, I guess it's just one. A Canadian goose has a moment to be forgotten, and you may have seen this. It's pretty funny. So here's the goose flying, trying to get off the field here. And, I really feel sorry for the animal.
I know, man. This could have been so much worse than it was. I guess he just couldn't gain enough altitude.
Yeah.
This
Watch
is bad right here, though.
Kaboom. Oh.
But maybe the champion of life needs to be this lady that just snatches him up. Snatches him up and kind of escorts him.
I mean, what if, listen, those geese are huge. I mean, I read The Trump of the Swan when I was a kid. I mean, those geese are huge.
Yeah,
if that thing lands and you're like next to you like that, I mean,
I can't tell you how many funny.
How scared is this goose right now between these seats?
There were
by
so
the way?
many funny jokes coming out of this because I think the Tigers were getting beat pretty bad.
Yeah,
and it was like 0, and like, we got rid of the goose egg. We got
very nice. All right, y'all have a great week. Enjoy, I should say, great weekend, and then enjoy your week. I know you'll love everything coming your way here on SEC Country Live. I will be back again the following Monday. Our podcast for now will be up, and you can check that out immediately after the show. And please continue to share the show with your friends on all the different video channels, Facebook, YouTube, everything else. Let them know that we're talking about the SEC here each and every afternoon. I will look forward to seeing you a week from now. Mike will see you on Monday. Talk to you soon right here on SEC Country Live.